Hola niños, today we're going to read Pastel para Enemigos by Derek Munson. Enemy Pie by Derek Munson. It seemed like the perfect summer. Dad helped me build a treehouse, sister was off at summer camp for 3 weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in the city. It looked like it was going to be the perfect summer, but it wouldn't be. All was going well until Joaquin Rojas moved to the block. I didn't like him. He laughed at me when he hit me at a baseball game. He had a trampoline party and didn't even invite me, though he invited my best friend Esteban. Joaquin was the first and last name on my list of enemies. I kept in my treehouse, a place Joaquin Rojas couldn't go. Dad knew about enemies. He said he had some when he was my age, but he knew how to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you? I'll show you, he said. He took out an old recipe book from the kitchen. In the book was a worn old piece of paper with something unreadable on it. Dad held the paper up and said, "Enemy pie." Maybe you're wondering what enemy pie is. I would like to know too, but Dad said the recipe was a secret. I thought it must be magic. I begged him to tell me about it. "I'll tell you one thing," he said. "Enemy pie is the fastest way I know of to get rid of an enemy." I began to wonder, what horrible things do you put in a pie for your enemy? I brought Dad weeds and worms and rocks for the pie, but he kept saying he didn't need any of them. I even gave him some gum I had chewed all day, but he just gave it right back. I went out to play. I shot the ball at the hoop until it landed on the roof, next to the boomerang that never came back. I could hear Dad chopping, mixing, and blending ingredients for the enemy pie. It looked like summer wouldn't be so bad after all. The pie was going to be horrible. I tried to imagine what it would smell like, or even worse, what it would look like. But as I hunted ladybugs, I smelled something good coming from the kitchen. How strange! I went to ask Dad what was going on. Enemy pie shouldn't smell so sweet, but Dad is smart. "If the pie smells bad, your enemy would never eat it," he said. Then I knew he had done this before. The timer went off and Dad took the pie out of the oven. It looked like a normal delicious pie. I was starting to understand the trick, though I didn't know how enemy pie worked. What happens to the enemy? Maybe it just makes him cry. Dad wouldn't explain, but as the pie cooled down, he told me there was something I needed to do. "There's a part of the recipe that I can't do," Dad whispered. "But to make sure it works, you need to spend a whole day with your enemy, and you have to be nice. It's not easy, but it's the only way. You sure you still want to do it?" Of course! Even if it was scary, I had to try. Just one day and I would get rid of Joaquin forever. I got on my bike, I went to his house, and I knocked on the door. When Joaquin opened the door, he looked surprised. He looked at me through the screen waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Want to play?" I asked. "Let me ask my mom," he said, seeming unsure. A little later he came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom came to the door and said hello. "Don't get into any trouble, boys," she said, smiling. We rode our bikes and played on the trampoline. After, we filled water balloons and tried to throw them at some girls, but missed. Joaquin's mom made us lunch. After, we went to my house. Though it sounds silly, I was having fun with my enemy. I even started to like him, but I couldn't tell Dad after all the work he put into his enemy pie. Joaquin liked my basketball hoop. He said he wanted one too, but there was no room at his house. And I even let him win, just to be nice. Joaquin knew how to throw a boomerang. It always came back to him. I tried, but it went over the house and it landed in the backyard. When we went into the backyard to get it, Joaquin saw my treehouse. It was my treehouse, all mine. I didn't have to give him permission to go in if I didn't want to. And if he wanted to, "Can we go in?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask. But he was the first person, the only person on my list of enemies, and enemies couldn't come into my treehouse. But he had shown me how to throw a boomerang, and he had invited me to lunch and let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't the best enemy. "Okay," I said, "but wait right here." I went in first and I took down my list of enemies. I had a game of checkers and some cards in my treehouse, and we played until Dad called us to dinner. We pretended not to hear him, and he hid when he came to look for us. But he found us. Dad made macaroni and cheese, my favorite. It was Joaquin's favorite too. Maybe he wasn't so bad after all. I thought we should forget about the enemy pie, but as soon as dinner was over, Dad took out the pie. I watched him cut the pieces. "Dad," I said, "it's nice to have a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to tell him we weren't enemies anymore, but Dad just smiled and nodded. He probably thought I was just pretending. Dad set down 3 plates. each with a piece of pie on it and a scoop of ice cream. He gave us both a plate. Wow, said Joaquin. My dad never makes pies like this. I panicked. I didn't want Joaquin to eat the enemy pie. He was now my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Joaquin, I yelled. Don't eat it. It's terrible. I think it's poisoned. Joaquin dropped his fork and looked at me. I saved his life. I was a real hero. If it's so bad, he said, why is your dad halfway done? I looked at Dad, and he was eating the enemy pie. Delicious, Dad said, smiling. Joaquin started eating. It didn't seem to have an effect. I tried a little piece. It was delicious. After dessert, Joaquin got on his bike and went home, but not before inviting me to play on his trampoline in the morning. He told me he would teach me how to do flips on it. As far as enemy pie goes, I still don't know how to make it, and I still wonder if enemies really hate it, and if I'll ever know the answer to that question, because today I lost my best enemy and made a good friend. I want you guys to answer one of these 3 questions in the Google slide below. Number 1, why do you think the dad said he had to spend the whole day with his enemy for the pie to work? Number 2, did the enemy pie work? Why or why not? And then number 3, how might you resolve a problem with an enemy? How would you fix a problem if you had an enemy? I can't wait to read your response. Los quiero mucho. I'll see you guys soon. Hasta pronto. Adios.